She said where she went wasn't my business. At 2 a.m., she called 43 times begging for help. At 6 a.m., I sipped my coffee and said, "Your problems aren't my concern either." She told me where she went was none of my business. Those were her exact words. Standing in our kitchen in Naperville, Illinois, car keys in hand, an unfamiliar perfume on her wrist, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Where I go isn't your concern, Gavin." I let her walk out. Several weeks later, at 6 in the morning, I sat at that same table with scrambled eggs, black coffee, and the Tribune when she stumbled through the front door. Mascara streaked her cheeks, one heel had snapped off, and her dress was wrinkled and twisted. She stared at me as if I should rescue her. I took a slow sip of coffee. "Why didn't you answer?" she asked, her voice cracked. "I called you 43 times. I set my mug down, looked at her, and said the words I had been rehearsing ever since the night she declared our marriage was no longer my concern. "Your problems aren't my concern either, Valerie." The silence felt longer than our final year of marriage. To understand how I could love someone for 22 years, watch her call 43 times, and never answer, you need to know what happened before that morning. My name is Gavin Mercer. I am 46, and for the last decade I have owned a commercial landscaping company in Chicago's western suburbs. Mercer Outdoor Services handles corporate parks, HOA contracts, and municipal properties across DuPage County. It is not glamorous, but it is mine, built through 12-hour days, cracked hands, and countless early mornings. I had 17 full-time employees and 3 crews operating at once. I do not say that to brag. I say it because the company represented years of work, responsibility, and a life Valerie increasingly treated as beneath her. Valerie used to tell people she had married a landscaper, then let the word hang like an apology, as though she had settled for a man who worked with dirt, even though that dirt paid our mortgage and built our life. We met more than 2 decades ago at a downtown Chicago fundraiser, one of those charity auctions where people overpay for dinner and bid on vacations they will never take. Valerie coordinated events for a PR firm in the Loop. She had a sharp smile and could enter a room and instantly know who mattered. I had just started my business and wore an off-the-rack suit from Downers Grove. She talked to me for 2 hours, and I could not believe my luck. 18 months later, we married beside the Fox River in Geneva, Illinois. Her parents traveled in, my brother Derek stood beside me, and 90 people watched us promise each other a life on a June Saturday. For the first decade, life was good. Not perfect, but honest. We bought a house, and 4 years into the marriage, our daughter Paige became the center of my world. Valerie ran events. I ran crews. We ate out on Fridays and drank coffee in bed with the Tribune on Saturdays. I loved our ordinary life. Around our 12th year, the temperature inside our house changed. It was like a window left open in November. At first, you barely notice. Then you keep adding heavier sweaters while insisting the house is fine. By the time you admit you are cold, you can barely remember what warmth felt like. Valerie started going to bed before I returned from late jobs. She carried her phone face down from room to room, guarded like a second wallet. She stopped asking about the company, though she had once known every crew member, every bid, and whether we had secured the Elmhurst Park renewal. I blamed fatigue, work, and the natural distance of a long marriage because explanations were easier than admitting something was wrong. Derek said it first. One Sunday in Wheaton, during a Bears game neither of us cared about, he muted the television. "Gavin, what's happening with you and Val?" "Nothing," I said. "We're fine." He gave me the look of an older brother who knew I was lying but would not corner me. "She came to Bridget's birthday dinner 2 weeks ago," he said, "and didn't mention your name once. Not once in 4 hours. You notice things like that." I went home that night and started noticing. There was a new gym bag by the door and hotel-sized shampoo bottles in our shower, the kind taken from hotel rooms, not bought at Target. One Thursday, I came home to a note saying she had gone out. When I asked where, her expression went flat. "Out with friends." "Which friends?" "You don't know them. Try me." She set down her wine glass with the particular kind of patience that is not patience at all. "Gavin, I'm 44 years old. I don't need to check in every time I leave the house." "I'm not asking you to check in. I'm asking where you were." She stared at me for a long moment before saying, "Where I go isn't your concern." Then she walked upstairs and left me standing alone in the kitchen. That was a Tuesday in early October. Afterward, I did not search her phone, hire an investigator, follow her, question her friends, or track her location. I wanted answers desperately, but I had begun asking a different question. If my wife had already decided I had no right to know where she went, what exactly was I still doing there? Not where was she, but what was I? After 22 years, where I go isn't your concern, is not about geography. It means she has stepped outside the marriage and rewritten its terms without you. I went to work, managed my cruise, picked Paige up from swim practice because Valerie had something going on, made dinner, and went to bed. I started paying attention not to Valerie's phone, but to what I would accept and who I wanted to be when this ended. That Friday, I called Derek from my truck outside a Jewel Osco in Naperville, while Valerie was wherever she went on Friday nights. I repeated her exact words. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I'm going to let her show me exactly who she is. And then? Then she doesn't get to be surprised when I show her exactly who I am." The next weeks felt like the silence before a storm, when the birds vanish and the air goes flat while the sky still looks clear. Everything in our house appeared normal, yet I could feel something enormous gathering just beyond sight. Valerie continued her Thursday evenings out and vague Saturday plans. Twice she stayed away all Friday night, texting that she was with Lauren Stafford, a woman I had met only twice at old company Christmas parties. My calls went to voicemail after 2 rings. Paige was 16, old enough to notice the shift but too young to carry it. I took her to soccer, helped with the ACT, and kept our marriage off her shoulders. Paige came first. In November, I met divorce attorney Sharon Trevino at her Washington Street office in Naperville. She spoke with the calm precision of someone who had heard every version of this story. "If you want to protect your financial position," she told me, "documentation matters more than confrontation." I had already reviewed 18 months of our joint credit card statements. There were restaurant charges on supposed gym nights, a West Loop Airbnb for a weekend she claimed to be at a conference in Indianapolis, and a florist charge tied to no occasion I knew. Alone, each was explainable. Together, they formed a pattern. I printed everything, placed it in a folder, and handed it to Sharon. I said nothing to Valerie. The decisive night began like the others. Valerie said she was going out without saying where. Paige was at a friend's house, and I reviewed a proposal for a new corporate account in Lyle. "Don't wait up," Valerie said as she pulled on her coat. I looked up. "Okay." She paused, as if expecting an argument she could use to justify leaving. When I gave her nothing, she walked out. I finished the proposal and went to bed at 10:30. At 2:14 in the morning, my phone rang. "Valerie." I watched it ring until it went to voicemail. 2 minutes later, a text appeared. "Gavin, please answer, I need help." The phone rang again. Then another message came. "Please. I'm scared." Then another. "Gavin, please answer the phone." Then, "Please. I don't know what to do." The calls continued until 5:47. 43 calls in total, each one lighting the dark bedroom. I read every message as it arrived and watched every ring fade into voicemail. I did not answer once. I know what that sounds like. What if she was hurt or in real danger? I considered it, but another thought stayed louder. "You told me your whereabouts were not my business, and my concern had no place in your life. Now, from wherever you are, and whoever you are with, you are calling the husband you declared irrelevant and asking for the concern you rejected." I turned the phone face down on the nightstand. I lay awake for hours, listening to the house and wondering what had finally made me more afraid of betraying myself than of losing her. I did not sleep, but I did not answer. At 6:04, her key entered the lock. I was showered and dressed, with eggs on the stove, coffee in the pot, and the Tribune open unread. Her footsteps crossed the hardwood in an uneven rhythm. Click, clunk, click, clunk. Then she appeared in the kitchen doorway. She looked like someone who had spent a long night moving in the wrong direction. Mascara streaked both cheeks. Her hair had collapsed. Her dress was twisted, and she held the broken heel like evidence. She stared at me. I drank my coffee. "Why didn't you answer?" she asked. "I called you 43 times. I placed the mug on the table. "Your problems aren't my concern either, Valerie." She had prepared for yelling, accusations, or tears, anything loud she could fight. She had not prepared for scrambled eggs, black coffee, and a husband already at peace with the morning. "There's coffee," I said, and returned to my breakfast. She remained in the doorway for 30 full seconds. I counted every one. Then she walked past me, climbed the stairs with one bare foot and one damaged shoe, and shut the bedroom door. Around 9, she returned, changed, and washed. Sitting across from me, she looked uncertain for the first time in months, not about me, but about herself and what had shifted between us. "What happened last night?" she began. "Is your business?" I said. "Not mine." "Gavin, stop. I'm trying to talk to you." "You're about 2 months late for that conversation." She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "I was with someone I had known for weeks, but hearing it in my sunlit kitchen made it real in a way statements and lies had not. Okay, I said. That's all you're going to say? What do you want me to say, Valerie? Something. Anything. Get angry. Say something. I'm done performing for you. I spent months performing as the understanding husband. I told myself you needed space. I pretended your nights away were private instead of suspicious. I'm done. The night you told me your whereabouts weren't my concern. You told me everything I needed to know. Not about where you were going, but about where we were. I stood and picked up my coffee. I called Sharon Trevino 3 weeks ago. Valerie's face went still. She knew the name. Years earlier, I had mentioned that Sharon handled a friend's complicated divorce. That's where we are now, I said. I'm not chasing you. I'm not screaming. I'm just done. I left her sitting there. The following weeks were quiet. But unlike the old silence of avoidance, this one came from finally naming what had happened. Valerie tried 3 times to save the marriage. I listened without yelling and asked the same question. What do you actually want, Valerie? The first time, she said she wanted to fix things. I asked what she was willing to change, what truth she was ready to tell, and what rebuilding would actually require. She could not answer. The second time, she told me she had ended the affair and said I needed to understand that she had been going through something. I know you were going through something, I said. You chose to go through it without me. 43 calls at 2 in the morning do not erase the months before them. The third time, she cried real tears. She said she had made a terrible mistake, no longer recognized herself, and missed who we used to be. I sat with her, not because I was returning, but because 22 years of love do not disappear overnight, and I did not want to become incapable of sitting beside another person's pain. Then I told her the truth. The Valerie I remember would not have looked at me and said where she went was none of my concern. She would have told me she was struggling. She would have said she needed something I wasn't giving her. She would have fought for us instead of quietly leaving. The person you say you miss was still inside this marriage. I don't know where she went, and I'm not sure you do either. She had no answer. The man was Colton Webb, 38, a pharmaceutical distribution sales director in Schaumburg. He drove a leased Audi, played Sunday golf in Barrington, and had a pattern with married women. Valerie met him at an August networking event in Rosemont. He was charming, attentive, and skilled at telling an invisible woman exactly what she wanted to hear. I learned the rest when Brooke Harlan called as I drove back from a Bolingbrook site visit. Mr. Mercer, she said, you don't know me, but I think we're in the same situation. Brooke was 36 and had been with Colton for 8 months, overlapping Valerie. After finding evidence of other women, she hired a private investigator. He uncovered an organized portfolio of relationships with married women, going through something all following the same playbook: attention, flattery, secrecy, and West Loop hotel rooms. Colton's warmth felt like a lifeline to women drowning at home. By Brooke's count, Valerie was the third married woman in 18 months. Colton had not stumbled into these relationships. He had built a repeatable system around women at their weakest. I thanked Brooke and asked how she was. She had filed for divorce from a husband who knew about her affair and had his own version of the same story. Some people find each other by accident, in the worst moments, she said. My attorney says it happens more often than you would think. Her voice carried no pride, only the exhausted clarity of someone who had finally stopped lying to herself. I told her I hoped she came through it all right. Afterward, I sat for 20 minutes outside a Portillo's on Ogden Avenue, watching people carry Italian beef sandwiches through ordinary Wednesday afternoons while my marriage collapsed. I thought about Paige, who needed 2 decent parents. I thought about our 22 real years and refused to turn them into weapons. I remembered the young man in the ill-fitting suit and considered who I wanted to be now. Then I drove home and made dinner. The divorce took 7 months. Sharon represented me. Valerie hired downtown Naperville attorney Paul Greer. We fought over the house, assets, and custody. Twice. Negotiations nearly erupted into open conflict. Both times I stepped away, not from weakness, but because I had chosen what kind of ending I wanted. I would not let one ruined part of our life poison every year that came before it. Paige handled it better than I feared and harder than I hoped. She had known before we told her. Children always know. One evening after a soccer game, she sat beside me in the truck and asked quietly, "Are you okay?" "I'm going to be." "That's different from being okay." "You're right, but it's the honest answer." She looked out the window at the Chicago suburbs passing by. "I think honesty is better," she said. We rotated through the house during the school year and settled the rest that summer. Valerie moved to an apartment in Oak Park. I stayed in Naperville. Paige spent time with both parents who loved her, and we kept our anger out of every handoff and school decision we could. She would not become collateral damage. I give Valerie credit without bitterness. She showed up for Paige. Whatever happened between us, she protected her bond with our daughter. I told her so after a difficult scheduling discussion, and she looked surprised. Not everything must burn, because the house did not survive. Colton barely mattered afterward. Brooke's aggressive attorney filed a civil case over emotional distress, fraud, and the financial effects of his repeated deception. I never learned every detail, only that his comfortable Schaumburg life became far less comfortable. I did not participate. I needed neither revenge nor a view of the fire. I only needed to leave the building. 14 months after that kitchen morning, I attended a meeting at the Naperville Park District offices on Martin Avenue about a 3-year landscaping agreement for 4 parks. At the far end of the 8-person table sat Operations Coordinator Renata Cole. Renata was 41, direct, practical, and used to making large public spaces function. Her detailed questions about drainage, soil, and seasonal transitions proved she had read our proposal instead of skipping to the price. We won the contract, and for the first time in a long while, professional success felt connected to something hopeful rather than merely useful. 3 weeks later, she called with a timeline question, and we talked for 40 minutes. The next week, I called with an answer to a question she had not yet asked, and we talked for an hour. She had a 9-year-old son, Eli, and had been divorced 4 years from what she calmly called a good lesson. She ran the DuPage River Trail on weekends and had dry humor that landed before you noticed it. In February, we had dinner downtown near Sharon's office, a coincidence I noticed but never mentioned. We talked for 3 hours. In the parking lot, she said, "That was really good, Gavin. Let's do it again." Simple. Direct. No games. I had forgotten how powerful clarity could feel. I drove home thinking about how peaceful it felt to sit across from someone without having to guess what she meant. What surprised me most was not the affair, Colton, the divorce, or the lawyers. It was what I learned about myself. For years, I called our coldness normal. I treated questions as control, space as virtue, and trust as something owed, even while evidence begged me to stop. Love does require trust and space, but it is not a performance for someone who is checked out or lying awake while your wife is with another man and calling it independence. When Valerie said, "Where I go isn't your concern," I should have answered, "Then we have a problem." In marriage, where each person goes matters not as ownership or control, but because 2 people should be on the same team. If one changes the game, the other deserves to know. Instead, I let her leave, then suffered, documented, and prepared in silence. One conversation probably would not have changed our destination, but when someone calls reasonable questions, unreasonable, and normal concern a violation, the statement is not about your questions. It reveals where that person already is. The kindest thing you can do for yourself is stop pretending you did not hear it. Paige is 18 now. She graduated in June and will study environmental science at the University of Illinois in Champaign, hoping to work in conservation or land management. Listening to her speak with the certainty of someone who has found herself, I wondered how, through everything, Valerie and I raised someone so strong and honest. I am proud beyond words. She has met Renata twice, briefly and carefully. Paige processes life in her own time. One day, as after that soccer game, she asked whether I was happy. This time I said, "Yes, I am." She considered my answer and nodded. "Good, Dad. You should be." She is going to be fine. I am 46 and still run Mercer Outdoor Services with 17 employees. We recently won a DuPage County Forest Preserve contract after 8 months of negotiation. Derek and I eat at his Wheaton home every other Sunday. My 72-year-old father lives in Rockford. He never told me what to do, even when I wanted him to, but calls every Tuesday to ask about the cruise and whether I ate a real dinner. Some Saturdays I visit the DuPage River Trail. I am not a runner. I only walk purposefully enough to suggest I might jog. Sometimes a dark-haired woman in running shoes comes around the bend, slows down, and walks the last mile with me. We discuss Eli's baseball league, my Lyle contract, or something funny from the Park District. It is ordinary. No secrets, no guessing, no phone turned face down on a table. It is the best ordinary thing I have found in a very long time. One final thing about Valerie. She was not a villain. Villains are simpler and give you something clean to hate. Valerie got lost inside a marriage, a life, and a version of herself that no longer fit. Instead of turning toward me and saying, "Gavin, I'm lost. I need something different," she turned away. That choice cost everything we built. She remains my daughter's mother and someone I loved for over 2 decades. At her best, She was sharp, capable, and warm in ways I do not want to forget. I hope she finds her way. I mean that. I simply stopped waiting for her to find it with me. Forgiveness, I learned, does not require reopening the door. The eggs were good that morning, scrambled with sharp cheddar. The coffee was black. The Tribune was open to a Wheaton rezoning dispute I had professional opinions about. Valerie stood there with a broken heel, streaked mascara, and 43 missed calls between us, asking why I had not been there. I told her. Then I poured myself another cup of coffee. I understand now what I did not that Tuesday in October. The moment you decide someone is not your concern, you lose the right to be surprised when they extend the same courtesy. Valerie made her choice. I made mine. Mine tasted like black coffee and scrambled eggs in a quiet Naperville kitchen while the sun rose over the Fox Valley. It felt like sitting still long enough to hear myself think for the first time in years. My name is Gavin Mercer, and I am going to be absolutely fine.